Seller's finance, vendor finance, that's when the seller of the business lends the purchaser, the buyer of the business, the money to buy the business. So they sell the business to them, the buyer pays that business off over time. Now there's a right way of doing it, there's a wrong way of doing it, and there's a couple of things that you need to know to ensure a bit more success in your negotiation. So this is the story of a client of mine. I'll talk through the offer he made, why he got it wrong, and how you can get it right if you're looking for seller's finance. So this is the story of a client of mine. His name was Rohit, and he wanted to buy a business. We had it for sale for $995,000, and he wanted to buy it with seller's finance, with vendor finance. So I'll talk through the offer he made, why it was a good offer or a bad offer. I'll talk through the mistakes Rohit made, what he got right, so you make sure that you don't make the same mistakes when you want seller's finance. So there's two opinions for seller's finance. There's the buyer's opinion, the seller's opinion. Now the buyer, they'll say, well, they should lend me the money for the business. They should have confidence that the business will continue to trade well and will continue to be successful. And if the seller has that confidence, then he'll lend me the money and the deal can be done. Now, the seller, on the other hand, goes, well, hang on, yes, I've got confidence in the business, but I don't have confidence in you. You might not be any good at running the business. You might be an idiot. You might not do anything. And you might run my business into the ground before paying me the money for it. So those are the two opposite opinions that you have on seller finance. So to get a deal done with seller's finance, with vendor finance, it requires careful consideration of both parties' wishes and balancing the risk for both parties. Rohit came up with a simple offer. Remember, the business was advertised for $995,000. Rohit offered $795,000 with no deposit, no interest. He wanted an interest-free deal. He didn't offer any security at all, and he would pay annually a lump sum at the end of the financial year, depending on the performance of the business. So that was Rohit's offer. So the owner of the business, he looked at the offer and he said, hang on a minute. So Rohit's offering me 20% less than asking price, and he wants me to fund him into the business. So in other words, he wants me to be his bank. He's not going to pay any interest at all. He's offering no security, and there's no fixed term, no fixed repayments. He's just going to pay me back, well, at some point, if there's some money in the business. No, I'm not taking that. Hard to really argue with the owner, isn't it? I mean, it's a bit like it if you sold a car to someone and that person said, great, I'll buy the car off you, but I'm going to pay you 20% less than what you're asking for. Just give me the car now, and in a year's time, I might pay you some money if I can afford it. And no interest, obviously, and no security. Well, really, would you take that sort of deal if you're selling a car? I certainly wouldn't. So we went back to Rohit and we said, look, there needs to be trust on both sides. The seller needs to understand you, your motivation, how you're going to run the business and what you're going to do. You need to understand that the seller's not going to just give you the business on the off chance that you might pay some money later. So we got the two of them together again, we sat them down, we did that a number of times until both parties understood each other's point of view a whole lot better. And that way we could then set about working out a deal that was acceptable to both parties. And I've said it before, a good deal, a good negotiation ends up with a little bit of pain on both sides. That's probably a good deal for all parties. The trust component in both sides is quite critical. The seller needs to believe that the buyer will run the business well, and the buyer needs to believe that he's buying a really good business and the seller will do all that they can to aid the transition and to help the buyer run a successful business. And that's a good working relationship that needs to happen in pretty much every business sale. So we had to develop that sort of trust and that sort of relationship. Now that both parties understood each other's point of view, we sat down, we rewrote the offer. Now, Rowett agreed to offer $900,000, not the $800,000 he was offering. He agreed to pay a sizable deposit, 25%. He also agreed to pay interest and offer security. There was a term attached to the loan, so we set it out over a 5-year period with monthly payments and interest calculated accordingly. Now, the vendor was really happy with that. He could see a simple process. He was getting his money over time. He had good security. Rowett put up a property for a mortgage, so there was easily security as well as the personal guarantee. The vendor then agreed to contract back to the owner for a 7 or 8 month, depending on how they felt, kind of period, and that would help Rowett understand the business, operate the business, and when everybody was happy that that was working fine, the vendor could quietly exit the business after handing over all the IP. So that ended up being a win-win situation for both parties, and that's really how vendor finance should work. It has to be a win-win for both parties. So negotiation was the key to both parties getting pretty much what they wanted out of the deal. But how do you negotiate a good deal? Well, what you don't do is negotiate like this. Have a look at that video, see what you shouldn't do when you negotiate. Thanks for watching. I'll see you over there. Cheerio.